people will be taking a lot more control over their data, and a lot of these kind of companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, whoever your kind of whatever platforms you're using to target your customers, they're going to have to be a lot more transparent over how you're targeted, and whether you actually, you want to opt in or out of those kind of targeting and that kind of stuff. And I think that's really it's great for consumers. It's actually great for advertisers as well, because it means that you can cut through the waffle, and instead of just targeting everyone, that you target only the people you want to speak to and only the people that want to be spoken to. So if anything, your performance will increase, the wastage will also kind of reduce. So I think to be honest, like a lot of the conversations we'll have over the next couple of years will hopefully continue in that vein of having the user at front of mind, instead of just pushing the message that the brands want to push. It's more about using the customer's data that they give you consent to use to target them in the appropriate way, and giving them the transparency to make the decisions that they want to make as well. So have control over the data.
We can just dive into it and just start the show. So I don't do any intros, Dan. So what I'll kind of just do is hand it over to you, I guess, at the start, to give a little bit of an intro to who you are and your background. Obviously, I know you from going back a fair few years now, back in the digital world. But I guess, what's your story, and who the fuck are you?
Who the fuck am I?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good question. I think Parkinson asked that once as well, didn't he? So that's how he opens up every interview, I think.
Really?
No, I'm joking.
Okay. I was like, yes.
So who am I guess? So I'm Dan Roberts, I think, and I guess you gave me my first break, I guess, in digital advertising.
Sort of.
So you obviously were my first line manager in paid search. That was I think I worked out earlier on. It's going to be seven years in June, I think. And that started out in Leeds at iProspect. So you were the first in there, right, to that team, and then you were like recruiting and
I was doing everything in the first year. I think I was like London every week, dealing with a client, trying to hire people. Was nuts, to be fair. I think that time was a nuts time, but you were first in the door, I think, as first hires, and you came in knowing nothing, to be fair, really, about digital advertising. I mean, you'd done well before that, though. You'd worked in marketing, but more broadly, right?
Yeah, I did I worked in charities and things before then. I did door-to-door sales as well, which I guess is
that's where I knew you from.
Yeah. I tried to sell you Sky.
A Bible. Oh, Sky. Yeah. Oh, I thought you were the Bible guy.
Bible was the one after Sky. Yeah, when that kind of company folded, I went and sold Bibles.
It's a natural progression.
Yeah, exactly. For my sins for selling Sky.
Yep.
So then, I worked in charities and things for a while. Did a little bit of kind of marketing and dabbled a little bit there, and then came across just by chance, really, like this opportunity. I was like, oh, this marketing sounds really interesting. It kind of it's fairly creative, I guess, as well in that sense. And I was really interested, obviously, in digital marketing at that point. And then I'd never really heard of paid search before, or even like search engine optimization or anything like that. And I kind of knew, like, obviously there's some way that people are showing me these ads that are kind of relevant to what I'm searching for, and I never really thought about it. So the more kind of I looked into it, the more interested I really got. So then I thought, screw it, I'll just go for this opportunity. It sounded really good. Obviously, it was on big clients, so really big company, and obviously I kind of met you then in the interviews and thought we could get on. I remember one of the questions you asked me actually was I think it was if I was a sandwich, what sandwich would I be?
Oh.
I think that was one of the questions.
That sounds like something I'd ask.
I can't remember what I answered. It was something like peanut butter or something. I don't know. I don't know why.
Well, it's interesting because those are stupid questions, but I think the thing about interviews is that I at least prefer to get to know the person as opposed to what
exactly.
are you a machine that'll fit into the system doesn't really make sense.
No, exactly. And you kind of asked me ironically because I remember you had this list of questions that you were given, I think, and they were just like, I'm not going to ask you any of these, but just an example. This is one of the stupid ones I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, because there was one. You're flashing me back now. There was one because everybody had the assumption that if you want to come into digital marketing, you're a bit of a geek or a nerd. So one of the questions was literally, what do you prefer, Star Wars or Star Trek? And I've asked people that before and had some people look at me and go, I've never seen either of them. And it's interesting though, because it does debunk that myth that not everybody that works in digital marketing is like we're not all geeks, maybe there's a little bit of a, I don't want to say geeky side, but you're into maybe certain sort of analytical things or patterns, but you're not necessarily you're not a fucking Trekkie necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. There's a real kind of misconception as well around the people that work in the industry around like just being like engineers or mathematicians or like computer scientists, and loads of the great people that I've worked with in the past have completely different backgrounds to that. Obviously you do as well, and then a few of the other people that we know and work together with, they just come from really strange backgrounds sometimes. So my background is in like sociology, which has got nothing to do with tech or computers. It's actually just around like how society works and the kind of the
is that not a part of
impact.
It? Don't you think?
I think
like a big part of patterns more than numbers anyway.
Yeah, so it's there's skills that are definitely transferable to it, right? So it's about kind of analyzing data and finding trends and patterns, I guess, and making actions off the back of it. So yeah, it's weird.
It's
so
interesting
I guess
that you were like saying that you didn't know really what paid search was. This was like 2013-ish kind of time, right?
Yeah.
I was saying when I had Christina on a few weeks ago and saying the same thing, that she didn't really know what it was when she started. And I don't think she started that much sooner than you. I think she's about she might be maybe a year or two sort of before you, but not we're not talking about 2000 here. And when I started in like 2006, 2007, I had no fucking idea what it was. I was the same. I was like, sounds cool. Let's try it. And then you fall into it and you're like, oh, this is, was it what you thought it was once you started?
It was, at first, I'll be honest, I find it really difficult to kind of transition from like charities into that. There was a lot of if you get the foundations right and you understand the fundamentals of how the auction works and essentially how to hack it to get to get the best outcome for clients, I think that's the bit that takes the longest. And once you nail that, everything else kind of falls into place.
Well, you kind of got thrown in the deep end, to be fair. I remember like you were one of the few poor ones who at the beginning, it was like month 1 in, and by like week 4, some people had left the London team and you kind of had to sink or swim. That literally was,
But everyone swam, right? Like, and that's because of like most people swam.
We know some people that didn't swim.
But,
it's fine.
Yeah, most people kind of floated, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's because of like the support network and stuff, I guess, really helps in that, right? Because no one was out to get each other. Everyone was really supportive, and we had some safety nets in place. It's kind of great being thrown into the deep end to a company or an agency that's foundations are pretty solid, and so I don't think it was as deep as we think, but at the time you feel like, oh god, I'm drowning, but it's looking back, I always think that if I hadn't have had that, then some of the stuff that came out of it would never have happened. So
exactly,
I don't regret any of it at all. It's all good.
Exactly. They do say there's a thing of like it takes 6 to maybe 9 months for it to really click. There's like a window of time for someone new to learn Google Ads. I don't think so much with Facebook. I think Facebook is probably a little shorter because it's just a bit more intuitive. You do need a bit more time, but than just to pick up and play. But I do think with Google, to learn the auction, to learn, like you say, hacking the system a bit, it does take 6-ish months for a newbie to kind of start to see the patterns a little bit. It's experience, I guess, just of situations, right?
Exactly.
It's interesting that you mentioned hacking the system. So I don't know what you think. My opinion is at a big agency with the clients that we've worked with, there are people that have gone through developing these strategies and understanding the system and the algorithm to create, I guess, a best practice as to how you might hack it. So there's kind of a foundation. But do you feel that maybe smaller companies or startups, or say someone who just picks up Google and wants to just play, have that kind of access to understanding what you're even looking at to hack in the first place? Or is it more exclusive to certain echelons of the industry?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what you want to get out of it, right? So it's for like if you just it's really easy to kind of go in now and just literally click a couple of buttons and you've got a Google Ads campaign set up. And for the average Joe, I guess that's their way of kind of for getting the results out of it. But really, if you kind of look into it a lot more, and you start to realize that there's more you can get out of it, but you need to have, like, to kind of take back that control a little bit more. And the only way you can get that is if you kind of do your own research and play around and test as well, actually. So and that's, I think, for the agencies, that's where, and for kind of experts in the industry, when Google has made changes that things like exact match changes, like same meaning, close variants, and all that kind of stuff, the broadening out of these kind of traditional ways that we know of working with search. When I first started, exact match was exact match. It was nothing else. It was just I'll target this keyword and it will serve an ad for that keyword and nothing else. But now it's kind of I'll target this keyword, but it might flip the meaning a little bit. Kind of same meaning, but it kind of flip the word. Sorry. It will add in kind of close variants to that word, and it's completely different now. And someone coming new into that, they don't know any different. So having that kind of that background and knowledge, I think, really does help today. Something that I really took for granted, I think, when I first started. And obviously I didn't have any of that experience as well. So I had to go back and look at kind of where Google's come from, where search overall has come from, and that's obviously where I kind of got interested in looking at and putting my own kind of points of view together through my blog and stuff.
And I guess the main thing is, like, the idea of relevancy for the end user. Like, it's easy as a marketer to get carried away and think, well, I've got to sell, I've got to get like sales or leads or whatever their objective is. But in Google's eyes, they could care less. As long as you're spending, they're gonna give you, in theory, better, opportunities to do that if they deem you more relevant. So it's understanding that whole kind of, I guess, underbelly of it in terms of what does that even mean? Like, what is a relevant ad? How does that differ as well based on the context of whether it's a search ad or a shopping ad or a video ad? And like, how can you then play to those metrics to give yourself the best opportunity? And that's a lot to kind of take in.
Yeah, there's just so much data now to play with as well to determine whether that is relevant or not. I think that it's easier now for people to come in and just set up a campaign by clicking a few buttons and let the kind of the machines and automation take over to determine what is relevant to that user, because there is so much data that we don't see, even as someone within agencies. It is kind of still seen as a bit of a black box. And to be fair, like in most cases it does kind of work as well. So but it's all about kind of testing the more manual methods versus something like automation. And again, like kind of talking about what the overall objective is as well, just always having that in mind, and how to get to there is it's obviously really important.
Yeah, I guess the smart objectives and the kind of automated campaigns are great for the pick up and play kind of thing, right? But to your point, you can go deeper if you want to. And I guess, do you feel like it's maybe, obviously it's still about keywords and that's not going to change much, but the weighting of that is maybe going to be a less than what it used to be. Do you feel, obviously, that now it's more of an intent audience-based overlay on top of that, so that it's not just about, okay, well, I'll turn on this automatic campaign and let it run. What you can control is, okay, but like, what type of audience is that maybe going to be overlaid with, or what's the messaging that we want to apply to that based on the intent? and it's becoming a little bit more of a hybrid with what Facebook might have been.
Yeah.
Like, is that sort of where you see it at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. It used to be when I first started, I guess, just keyword targeting, and obviously some of the audience products were available then as well. But they were kind of just seen as like, oh, we'll just add it on and just see what happens, and we'll kind of optimize towards that if we need to. But now it's, the broadening of the keywords targeting has just meant that the only element of control you have, or one of the biggest elements of control you have, is through that audience grouping. So now you have an audience spectrum that basically covers every kind of area of the consumer journey, right? So you've got in-market audiences, affinity audiences, similar audiences, remarketing lists, all those kind of things. And the way that advertisers get ahead now is targeting those users and bucketing those users in a much more strategic way than we ever have done before. So that's, I think, where a lot of my efforts and my team efforts has been over the past couple of years in particular, is making sure we stay ahead of that trend of audience targeting, and we're smart, right, in terms of how we bid and the message that we show and the landing page that we take them to and that kind of thing. So you target the user based on where they're at in that journey, and that's how you're going to win.
So what do you think, like, as automation only becomes more prevalent and the machine learning becomes even more sophisticated, like, what is your opinion on how that might evolve just for any advertiser, whether it's a big agency or whether it's just, someone who can only spend $20 a day and it's a startup? Like, what's that shift possibly going to move into, do you think?
I think even for it even to shift significantly, I guess even more significantly than it has done in the past couple of years in particular, I think kind of touched upon it earlier on, but kind of moving from this old school way of thinking to this new school way of thinking is going to be really important. So we need to try and convince these people that moving towards this world is the way to win. You still see now, like, every time Google makes a change, like the old school kind of group is just kind of like, oh my god, what the hell's going on? Like, how come Google are doing this again? Like, we're having less and less control now. What the hell are they doing? And that's because there's a real fear in the industry that it's going to replace you. That automation is going to replace this person, this old school person that's have all this knowledge, all this experience, and that it's better at like predicting bidding than I am, and then people are really scared of that. They're threatened, right, and they don't like it. But I think we just need to remove that skepticism, because ultimately you need to remember that, like, we still essentially train the models. We still need to give it the data to make some decisions. Ultimately, we write the code essentially that someone does, a human does in the background, I guess. And you need to kind of reframe the position, I think, that you think of automation.
I guess it's the algorithm doesn't know your business. Like, the algorithm doesn't understand external world things or what your business tone is.
Exactly.
So I guess the role of people is going to shift, but it doesn't mean you're going to be defunct. Unless your job was literally just to be the guy in the corner who was manually inputting everything. But maybe it's not so bad if you're losing that job anyway. That's a pretty shitty job.
Exactly. Completely agree. So you need to completely, reframe your position. So it's about that kind of more strategic thinking. It's about how these ecosystems kind of maybe kind of work together or could work together. It's hacking in a different way. So it's using audiences more strategically, like we just discussed. So it's those kind of things. And ultimately as well, like, I think humans are still more creative than machines. So you could talk about Google isn't great at creating ads, for example. Like, if you automated that, like, sometimes it doesn't make sense. It's a bit jumbled up. You don't get the kind of tone of voice right for the client. So I think that humans still need to feed into that process still. So I think there's still a place for us.
And it's the same on like YouTube or Facebook when you're putting up top of funnel video content. Like, you make that, they don't make that.
Exactly.
And it's almost, I mean, the way I kind of talk about it is that, these platforms are just the new modern day version of what radio, TV commercials and print were or are, but no one really, I drive past, now I'm not even going to see a billboard because I'm not allowed outside. TV commercials, it's like, what the fuck is that? I've zoomed past it all the time. But you would see a 15-second pre-roll on YouTube sometimes because you have to. And it's almost like people having to shift to, okay, either you sell online and you understand digital, or you, especially with what's happening now, or you're screwed. It's like, did you see Primark have like in March they made zero, like
Yeah, I saw that.
zero revenue, and you're like, well,
Crazy.
it is if you think about it, but then you're like, well, if you're only relying on in store, you're in trouble, right? So
Yeah, surely they have to change that now, right? And I guess that's how they keep their costs low as well. But it's crazy. Like I think there'll definitely be a shift after this, that to everyone to invest more into their kind of websites and into their online businesses. I think more than they ever have done before. It helps kind of safeguard them for the future, obviously, for if this ever happens again. Hopefully not, but then
no,
yeah, you get
it might not, but I think you might find that when we come out of it, you'll have a lot more
yeah.
consumers wanting to shop online because they're not comfortable going to a store, or they don't want to mingle as much. Like, who knows the psychology of people coming out of this, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's naturally going
Cultural
to.
shift.
So if I'm okay, pretend that I'm not a big multinational company that has loads of money to spend on this and is doing it anyway. I'm a medium-sized or small business, and I've been on the fence about it because I don't trust it or whatever. You come in, and you've obviously got all the experience in this world. What's like, not the pitch or the sell, just like what's the conversation to someone like that? Maybe someone listens or watches this at some point one day, and it might help them go and tweak and go, oh, okay, I get it. Like, what's the rationale now from your point of view to do digital if you aren't?
I think for search in particular, I think you always get the question of how do I rank number one on Google, and to do that is it's a lot of work, right? So it's particularly within search engine optimization. It's definitely doable, depending on even for small businesses. If you kind of have the right strategy, I guess it's still doable. But paid search is a way for you to test what the impact might be of being in that position, for example. So I'd say it's definitely worth a go. I would always say start small. Understand what your objective needs to be. Don't just kind of turn it on and hope for the best. If you want sales, then go for sales. If you want traffic, then go for traffic. If you want a return on investment, then go for that. So always have that in mind as well. And I guess finally, just have the kind of the mindset of the person you want to target in mind. How do they want to kind of be presented with an ad? What message would they want? What landing page experience would they want? That's when you're going to get the best results as well, because obviously that impacts things like quality score. Your performance in terms of conversions will improve, and you'll kind of get the best success from that. And then you'll be able to then use that data to inform what you want to do in the future.
I guess
Definitely
it's
worth
like,
the test.
yeah, like if I'm sitting here and I'm on the fence about it, I suppose it's that point of you can actually speak to your end users or different groups of your end consumers in a way that you couldn't with a billboard or a TV ad. Where like that is just normally one universal message.
Exactly.
With search or with Facebook or Instagram, you can with audiences give different messages to those different niches based on who they are, where they live. I mean, what's to stop you from saying, just targeting people in London who are, I don't know, single and interested in bikes. And you put a message that's totally like skewered around that versus someone who maybe doesn't live in London and lives in Scotland and doesn't want to cycle because the terrain's, I don't know. You can talk to people differently.
Yeah,
is the point.
Yeah, exactly. And more and more is going online. So it's and obviously the pandemic has helped prove that as well. Like the fact that we are having this conversation now is amazing. And more and more people are doing it. Exactly.
Technology. Interesting thing that I find is, and you may find this too, a lot of people are more happy or aware of Facebook ads. They're more willing to test Facebook ads. I'm talking about like startups or like micro businesses as well. Some people maybe are a little more risk averse when it comes to Google. Like, why do you think that might be? Is there a reason for it, or is there room for people to do both?
I think so. I think In terms of what? Sorry, in terms of.
Well, I know a lot more people with a small business will just pick up and do a Facebook ad more happily and
Yeah,
readily test it than they would a Google ad. Is that because the platform on Facebook is, do you think, just, I mean, it is a bit easier to just pick up and go. Is it
I think
that?
so. Yeah, I think Facebook has obviously had a lot of success in recent years from um, making it so much easier for small businesses to literally boost a post is a very basic like kind of form of marketing, or like so the interface and the step-by-step guides that it gives you is so much kind of easier, and Google have definitely picked on that over the past few years, and they've made their interface so much easier for small businesses to do that. They even have that they set up the digital garage, I think it was called.
Yeah.
They went into like obviously cities and helped small businesses get on board to Google Ads. So I think they've definitely made a conscious decision to target those kind of startups. And I think, yeah, you're right. It just comes down to the fact that the user interface is essentially much more simpler. I think the fact that on Google's obviously a lot more established in terms of what it does there. So I think people kind of get a bit scared of the fact that there's so many options and they don't know where to start. So that's where some of the automation will come in as well. I think it'll try and obviously navigate you down a road that it thinks is best suits your business. So I think, I think also as well, I think small businesses, they love Facebook, right? Because it's got so many of the options that you kind of just talked about earlier on. So, but Google has that as well. So I think it's definitely worth trying out as many of the options as possible. Obviously, you've got Microsoft as well, which kind of feeds into that. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess with Facebook, you can integrate your Shopify store to your business
yeah,
page. You can directly sell from there, but I guess it's more of a understanding what the user is doing on those platforms. Like
yeah,
I'm not on Facebook to buy, whereas if I'm on Google, I'm probably in a different stage of the process. So
yeah,
they're both valid. I guess it's just, again, like what you said at the top, if you're a business wanting to market, know which, these are just tools, really. Like it's not anything more than just a tool in your tool belt. So it's not that one is better than the other. It's more that which one do you want to use for what you want to achieve, and
yeah,
and learn about it. Don't go with the guru on the internet who like is selling you a course that's only done this like for a year, who doesn't know what
yeah.
they're talking about.
I've seen so many of those ads on YouTube. Have you seen it? It's like, if you want to know how to make $10,000, it's like selling these like fake teeth or something.
Exactly. It's like a guy, I was once a bald man. Now, using digital marketing ads, I've turned into Fabio. It is, yeah, and like some of the stories are probably true, and others you're like, it's
Yeah,
people that have read a marketing book and are using marketing lingo to play into
yeah,
people's insecurities, you know?
yeah. There's loads for Amazon as well at the moment. It's like there's I feel really sorry for this guy every time I see the ad, but it's like, don't be like this guy. Don't be like John. He's he lost $10,000 in a day from making a stupid decision on Amazon. It's like, oh my god, like, come on.
Well, it's interesting. It's people playing on people's insecurities and then
Yeah,
pretending there's a magic bullet.
yeah,
And like you've already alluded to this, it's testing. Like these aren't
yeah,
platforms that are gonna just magically make you rich. I even get it now where people come to me and say, "Okay, so how much money can you guarantee I'm gonna make, and what's the cost per lead and cost per action that I'm gonna get?" And you're like, it's a test. It's not gonna
yeah,
be, and it's not gonna be the same every single day of the week. So it's almost people having to also understand that. I guess it's that there's so much data. There's now this expectation that you're gonna get it down to like an exactness,
hmm,
as opposed to no, the data is just gonna inform you of what's ebbing and flowing, and you have to
yeah,
adjust to it. It's not a way of guaranteeing you that you're gonna become like rich overnight.
yeah, exactly. And you need kind of like consistent data, I think, as well. Because if you have like a kind of stop start kind of approach to your campaigns, which maybe small businesses might do, um, you're going to have irregular data that you can't really make many decisions from. So I think if you were to start, then you need to start small, but maybe for a sustained longer period of time, so you get a real kind of mix of the seasonality and times of day and days of the week data and that kind of stuff. Otherwise, you might make some of the wrong decisions, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's a hard one, like having just said that about predicting what's going to happen. But obviously, big agencies, I don't think are going to go anywhere. But with automation and all this stuff we've just been chatting about, do you feel like there might be a slight shift in terms of the way that your roles might exist and how you deal with clients, and what do you think that could look like in the future?
I think it's the age-old question, isn't it? I think agencies are constantly adapting. Like the agency I work for today it wasn't the same as it was last year, and it's not going to be the same as it is next year. For example, like this, it's always going to change, and that's, I guess, how a lot of these agencies kind of continue going, right? So if you don't adapt, then you kind of if you don't evolve, then you die essentially. So I think yeah, you're right. We are going to have to evolve, and that might mean repositioning the kind of understanding of roles and the opportunities within agencies, and that then we need to adapt to how clients work as well. There's over the past few years, obviously the in-housing trend has continued to kind of grow, and I guess the value of agencies has come into question over things like transparency and that kind of stuff. And I think the agencies that are doing really well at the moment are the ones that are being transparent, the ones that are adapting to the client needs, and they tailor themselves around the clients, and ultimately that helps to ensure that they deliver the best results. So I think with all the kind of the predictive stuff, the automation on top of that, all of this just kind of helps you do a lot of the day to day. And I think agencies, then the role for them moving forwards is around how do you kind of navigate all this kind of automation, all the data, all the kind of how do you adapt to things really quickly. That's their position, and that's essentially their role with clients, I think, moving forwards.
It's really, I guess, like you have the experience. So what you're really doing, I guess, is guiding them and consulting them strategically, because you've got, so many years in the game. Whereas if they just picked up and played and did it themselves, they might get results, but they wouldn't have, they wouldn't be getting the ship steered maybe in the best way possible. Which makes total sense. So I'm thinking then off the back of that, say I'm someone who wants to get into the industry, right? Like obviously you said you started out not knowing anything about it and you kind of fell into it, and it was different then, than it is now. So for someone who wants to maybe get into digital advertising now, or when we're allowed to, off the back of this lockdown, what would be some of your key bits of advice, I guess, to that person, a fresh grad or someone who's done a few years of general marketing and just wants to shift? Like anything that they should brush up on, know about? What should they expect? How should they cater themselves to it?
I think, like we touched upon earlier, is that the expectation is that you have to come from these kind of mathematician and scientist backgrounds or engineering backgrounds to join the industry, and that's definitely not the case. I think if anyone's a fresh grad or looking to start new into the industry, you just have to have these transferable skills that we talked about. I actually pulled out some like really old notes from my interview with you.
What?
And like some of the things I kind of wrote about, like in case you ask like any of these kind of questions again,
like what's your favorite sandwich?
Like why do you want to go into the industry and like all that kind of stuff. I thought like it would kind of help me to try and understand maybe from a new person's perspective how that might happen. But I wrote down constantly like this idea of the smart creative.
Okay.
So I think that someone that has like you need to have obviously the technical knowledge, analytically, you have to be analytically smart. Obviously, you can do that in a way that we discussed before. Like you don't have to necessarily have this kind of scientific background. If I came from sociology, which is a different kind of analytics, I guess. Or even I know a lot of people that have like studied law and psychology and that kind of things. At university, and they're really transferable as well, because it's all about analyzing lots of data in different ways and trying to find patterns. So I think the other thing you have to think about as well is you have to be constantly curious. I think if you're one of those people, I think that this industry fits well for you because there's no kind of sitting back and relaxing and just letting it all run, which you might fall into that pattern if you may be a small business, or if you've just kind of let it, set up a Facebook campaign, you just let it run and let the automation algorithms kind of do its thing. But I think you have to be kind of constantly curious as to what if I tweak this, or what if I change that, and I think that bodes really well for people that come into the industry. So there's not kind of any one answer really. It's just like loads of stuff that
Sure.
But I think that's number one fundamental thing for me is that don't think that because you come from a certain background that you can fit in quite easily. I think the most varied, the more varied you are, I think the more actually the stronger you will be in the industry. So, and we need that because otherwise you end up just getting the same ideas. If people just hire the same kind of people, then you end up just getting the same ideas. You becomes inertia, and you just you don't get anything new. You don't innovate. And I think that's why the teams that we worked with before, I think that's why we all worked really well, because we were all like completely different from each other in some aspects, and then in others we were like really similar as well. So it's it's a
Well,
weird
you
one.
need that mix, right? And like with anything, it's not just with this industry. I think any industry is, you work with a team because you want other people that have strengths in areas that you don't, to then help make the collective stronger. It's not
Yeah.
about everybody has to be a perfect machine robot that does this like 6 things flawlessly, right? And like now, especially as well, I think that this whole kind of data analytical world and then like the more creative storytelling world of being two separate entities,
Mhm.
it still exists, but it's like the two, if you could have people that can mix those two together,
Mhm.
is actually where the money is. And it doesn't mean you have to be like super amazing at one or the other. It's having that understanding of how you can be at least good at both. And I get to your point, curious, like
Mhm.
having all the data is great, but how can I creatively use that data to then tell a story to the end user? And that isn't something that you're taught in one set degree, or that you even just get by doing a job. It comes from what you're saying, I guess, wanting to learn and explore and find new things.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and then working with other people that have ideas that they can share with you and grow from.
Yeah.
So you touched on teams.
Yeah.
I'm slightly mindful about talking about teams because we've worked in crazy teams. Um, but it is a big part of it, and in any company and an agency life, like culture is such a generalized word that people throw around, and you think that if you just have like 3 values for your company statement, that makes you a good company. What, in your point of view, do you think? I don't want to say what do you think makes a good culture, or what are like the values that are the right kind of values. It's more in your experience, I guess, like how do you feel you've worked best, and what kind of team environments do you think are most conducive to good work?
Mhm. Um, I guess there's not only one answer. I think it's like you said, like culture is a weird one because it means different things to different people, right? So but for me, like it's looking back at the teams that I know that I've worked in really well. That's I think I like to think of this idea of like keeping people crowded. Um, in the offices and environments and in the teams that I've worked in, we've all been like so close together, and we've been kind of almost like living on top of each other when we work. Um, I used to I used to hate the idea of my like desk being messy, but actually now I love it because it's my mess, it's my desk, it's my it's you can have the same on your laptop as well. Like my folders are everywhere and that kind of thing. But that's what gets my kind of creative juices flowing, I guess, is working on top of people and kind of working with each other in that way where you can kind of bounce and learn and like having these kind of conversations I actually found really useful because I'll be honest, like kind of like when I work in like by myself or something on a post or whatever like that, I find it quite difficult. So I'm always kind of like bouncing ideas off people, maybe on Twitter or just in a text or something like that. And I think that that really helps me personally. And I know that like the crazy teams that we've worked in, obviously, I think that's still the case as well. I think that's when we worked off each other because we were all so crowded um, and we got some really good results, which is good.
It's the vibe, right? Isn't it? It's like it's knowing that you're not going to be judged or sort of slandered, saying something that could be deemed wrong.
Yeah,
whatever that.
You need that freedom, and your line managers need to give you that trust and transparency and freedom to do that as well. A lot of the places that I've worked where I felt uncomfortable is when have you heard of like the concept of the hippo? The hippo is like the highest.
Depends what context we're talking about.
So not the animal, but I guess like in the sense of the highest paid person's opinion.
Okay, go on. Not in this way anyway.
So the teams that I think that work well is the ones that don't always listen to the highest paid person's opinion, for example.
Oh, we never listen to the highest paid person on our team.
Exactly.
Yeah, I spoke to him yesterday. I still don't listen to him now.
I spoke to him last week as well, and I didn't listen to him either. But
yeah, exactly. How's it going, Elroy? Peace.
And I think that really again that's a perfect example because we respected him. We understood his points of view, but we didn't always agree, and we challenged it.
But it's that he welcomes that challenge, right? It's exactly, not that like if you came to him and could prove a point that differed his point of view, and he got it, then he's like, cool. Yeah. Or if he thought, actually, no, I can disprove it. Here's why. Mm-hmm. He gave you the platform at least to have the debate.
Yeah,
and I think that's the key, right? That's what.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and lots of places don't do that. And that's where you kind of see the culture of fear come about, and people get too scared then to challenge the hippo, for example, and then you end up just getting the highest paid person's opinion, and that's the only way you're gonna get things done. And it's really kind of oppressive culture, and I think those are the ones that don't work well. So I think as a kind of like mantra, I always try and make sure that my teams follow the idea of this obligation to dissent. So it's
like organized anarchy.
Exactly, yeah. But look back, right? Look back at the teams that we had, and they're the only ones that worked really well are the ones that were kind of open to and confident enough to
you say that. I did walk around with a baseball bat quite often, so.
There's balances, right?
There's balances. Like you have to have. I think it's also knowing that people aren't going to take that for granted. It's a challenging one because I wanted to. This is like a natural segue into then managing people, and I did want to ask you about the experience of managing your transition to coming into being a manager because I find that interesting. And I think for me, a big part of that is I personally don't believe in the idea of people have to earn your respect. That's just me. I believe everybody has it by default when I first meet them, and it's theirs to keep or lose. Right? So if I hire someone new and it's my job to manage them, they have to, keep that respect and do things that keep it. But I equally have respect for them out of the gate too. And it's then about just looking at it and saying, well, okay, you have to do certain tasks, but you're a human as well. And it's managing those people so that it's that balance of how can you get something out of them and not dictate, but also not have it be that they're like taking the piss and taking that for granted. And it's like an interesting balance. How have you? I guess the first part would be how do you manage that now? Like how is your management style, and what do you do to deal with that?
Yeah, so my management styles, I guess, I just try and take the bits of every line manager that I've ever had. I think I've been quite spoiled actually. But I always had a line manager that I can take like some of the best aspects of what they've done and then kind of apply that to how I think it should work. So obviously, like with you, I think that the resounding thing that I remember is you always cared about the people first.
I was so concerned about what
yeah. That could have gone a lot. Yeah, there's other things as well.
There's other things that my lawyer will sue the shit out of you for if you bring up.
Yeah, exactly. Which I can't bring up on the podcast. But
that'd be it's the only thing I cared about.
Yeah,
if I'm being
exactly.
honest. And
Everything else.
I mean, it's not that I didn't care, but I like jobs after that as well. I
Yeah.
literally went in and said, I don't give a fuck about how much money we make for your client.
Mm-hmm.
That's just personally how
Yeah.
I'm wired. And it's the only reason I would actually go to work and go to those teams on the daily. I wasn't inspired so much about specific tests per se. It was more about how we could work with people to execute those tests.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Yeah.
that's my take.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, I think obviously you were great at that, so I always try and bring that into what I try and do with teams as well. And then you get other people, right? So you have like Elroy, for example, who's great at the technical stuff, so try and bring some of that in as well. And I think he was always keen to know the detail enough to kind of be able to have conversations with you about things that you were quite challenging with it came to clients or anything like that. So I think I always try and get the perspective of the person I'm speaking to as much as possible. And I think he was great at that. He was great at kind of bringing people together into like that team environment. So
And the
community, I guess.
depth of
Yeah, exactly.
research. Like
Yeah,
he would never want to go into a meeting feeling like he didn't have an answer to any possible question.
exactly. Yeah. So he was always well prepared, and I think that's really important. But I think a couple of years ago, I did a really great session on it. Like I think actually it was one of um, the sessions I did. I think you kind of put me forward for it. It was like one in London that we did. It was called situational leadership. It was called, and that's a great model. I still use that today, and I sometimes print it out and like when I'm kind of going through kind of things with people that I line manage, and I just make sure that I'm following the model. But it's all about like adapting your line management and kind of leadership to the person's kind of situation. So it's about treating everyone equally, but managing them differently, and dependent on obviously that certain situation. So there's things that I'm just terrible at, like finance. I just don't like it. So I try to avoid it, and then in those situations I need to be managed differently, right? So I need to someone needs to direct me and tell me exactly what I need to do in those situations. But if some stuff on page set strategy I'm quite good at, so in those situations my manager needs to be different in how they manage me. They need to kind of maybe take a step back and more of like a consulting kind of leadership role. So that's how I kind of try and lead teams, and I think that then feeds all the stuff we've already talked about. So it's giving them the freedom, the kind of the opportunity, the transparency, and almost just treating them like humans, as you were saying. But it's managing their kind of output differently, um, depending on what the situation is. So it's a really good model. I definitely recommend looking at that.
Okay. Which can be challenging too, right? Because obviously sometimes they're not going to have the same breadth of experience as you.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be easy to want to just speed things up, or maybe you
Yeah.
have pressure from other people to do things in a certain
Yeah.
way. But it's that whole idea of like short-term gain versus long-term growth, and like what
Yeah.
is more beneficial, to get a quick buck or a quick win now,
Uh-huh.
or actually help the person learn the skill, even though it might
Mm-hmm.
take longer, but then in the long run you're going to win countless times in perpetuity off the back of it.
Yeah.
Which does kind of flash back a little bit to when you obviously transitioned to being a manager yourself. And that was kind of my second part of the initial question, which is for you, when you were going from doing the 24/7 in the role to then being someone who managed people, what did you find were some of the biggest shifts in that, and maybe some of the challenges? Because I spoke to Christina about this, and a lot of people obviously go through that transition. And I think it's good to share that insight. And also, like, do you think everybody is suited to be a manager? Do you have to be one just because the agency hierarchy says? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think definitely not. I know some great people that have just kind of stayed at the same level, and they're really kind of content with that, and we use them as kind of differently. Essentially, we don't maybe they don't want to manage people, but we make sure that the skills that they've learned and the reasons why they're so good is that we try and transfer those into the other people as well. So they kind of like indirectly manage people, but they kind of train them up, they coach them, so it's different. But I think for me though, it's really hard. I think that's the hardest step, is going from like the person that does the do, like you said, and kind of starts to manage people. And I think the reason why it's so hard is because you end up just, you want to kind of do the do still, um, whilst kind of still managing the person that does the do as well. So is you know that you can do it, and it's easier for you to go in and just quickly do it, right? But that's not how you kind of you get effective management. So the person that you're managing then is not going to be able to do it for themselves eventually. So that you need to kind of, like you said, it's that short term versus long term gain. And again, that comes back to the situational leadership stuff, because in that situation, if you pick the wrong kind of leadership approach to that task, then the consequences could mean that the person then just gives up on that task. They kind of get stuck in a cycle of not being able to do it. You end up having to kind of direct the situation all the time, or end up just doing the do, and it's just not healthy for anyone. So I think it's a really hard transition. But once you do it, and you kind of, it's really difficult, right? It's that Elroy said this, actually. I remember the first time he said it. It was growth through discomfort, and it's really uncomfortable, and it's at first, but you grow, and everyone grows, and your team grows around you once you start making that switch. But it's worth it once you get through it.
I mean, what was the mindset switch for you? Because I remember it did take a little bit of
Yeah.
time, right? And I'm just talking from the point of view of maybe people that are going through it, or maybe someone who potentially might be going into that kind of position in a few months or years. Any kind of, I know it's unique to each person, but any little bits of advice, or how did you get through it, I guess?
Go on holiday is my like or switch off, because you realize that the world doesn't crumble once you go, when you come back. um and make sure when you come back, you don't pick up the stuff that you were doing before, and that's a way to force the change through. And then once I started doing that, I think my kind of anxiety levels were like right down, like and that's when I started to make that switch in my mind. Is like, okay, maybe I don't need to do this. Like, this person's more than competent to do it. Just because I love doing it doesn't mean that I have to do it.
It also doesn't mean you can't do it anymore. It just means,
Yeah, exactly.
that's actually quite a good hack. I've never thought of it that way, but it actually, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe not like on day one,
Go on
like,
holiday.
no, I'd say good luck. It's like,
Yeah.
they threw me in the deep end. Guess what?
Exactly. Yeah.
Karma's a bitch. No, but that is a good idea. It makes sense. Psychologically, it makes sense, for you to kind of literally have a physical break.
Yeah.
And then come back to sort of the new
Yeah.
role and see the world hasn't burned.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's gonna be like team leaders everywhere going, no.
Yeah.
Don't you dare. All right, dude. Let's pivot slightly. I want to just spend a little bit of time to talk about, what you do, I guess, outside of agency life and agency work, and the work you've done with your blog. You very quietly touched on it earlier, but not sort of too pronounced. But PPC Hub have obviously been going for a while. That's your blog. I mean, how? I guess first, maybe tell people a little bit about what the blog is, and then we can maybe talk about how it came to be.
Yeah, sure. So the blog is basically it's a site for kind of PPC and SEM professionals to share actionable insight. And I stress the actionable insight piece, because it's, for me, that's the whole reason why I set it up. Is to basically cut through the crap and give people the stuff they need to essentially make a decision. There's so many blogs out there in the industry. The great ones to an extent, I guess, but they're always fighting to be the first to just say something. The latest update, they'll just say it. They'll just post it, and just, that's it. And for me, like, as kind of someone kind of starting out early in my career, I was kind of reading these and thinking, oh, that's great, but like, what does that mean? Like, what do I need to do with this information? Like, what stuff can I do? So there was a real kind of gap in the market for that. So I try to make sure that every time I post, I try and answer like roughly in the kind of 3 areas. So I kind of introduce like what the update is, talk about why the kind of partner, or kind of the supplier is kind of is doing that. So if it's kind of Google, Microsoft, Facebook, blah blah blah, YouTube, why they're doing it, and ultimately what does that mean for you, and what do you need to do. So that I try and structure every post in that way, and I think that it's differentiator, I guess, to what the other blogs do in the industry, because they just spout out all the stuff that they need to, and then most of the time they're kind of just trying to sell something else anyway. So it's really not that kind of objective. So yeah, I mean, for me, that's the whole point. I set up the blog, really. It was trying to give people the actionable insight and to try and be as objective as I could.
Do you feel that some of the others, not that they're again good or bad, it's not about that, but do you feel that they're more sort of editorial journalist style in terms of how they approach the content?
Yeah, definitely.
Because I've seen postings for some of them where they literally have labeled it as sort of journalist style job opening, and some of the specifications of the role were like, we need to be sort of almost first to press.
Yeah.
When a new update comes out, what you were saying just there was the same thing. Like, we need you to have an opinion on the update and write about it like almost ASAP. But then you don't even know what the update means or have had time to think about what it could do.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the hubbub. That's the kind of idea, right? Is that there's so much noise that goes on, like in the industry. Everyone has a point of view, but the one that I kind of try and share is it's just the point of view of what I think you need to do. So, and people can take it or leave it. It's up to them, really. But I try and get as many people as I can to also kind of post their points of view as well, to try and get some real kind of diversity and stuff in there, because I am quite conscious sometimes of it just being my point of view and, and no one else's. So which is yeah, it works quite well. And the readership goes up every year, which is great. And to be honest, I find it quite difficult to keep on top of now with everything else that's going on. Over the past few weeks, I thought I'd have more time to focus on the blog, but then actually, there's been less and less updates from even like Google and Microsoft. Are all kind of like struggling to adapt from work from home as well. So, and it's not a great time to make some big sweeping updates that we need to kind of discuss about anyway. So, I actually took a couple of weeks off, which is quite healthy, I think.
It's that thing of feeling like you have to write a post just because you have to do a post.
Exactly. And when it gets to that point, I always try and switch off a little bit, because the idea is that we try and cut through the hubbub and we only post when really there's something worth talking about.
Yeah.
And there's something worth, something actionable and insightful to share. So, yeah.
And so, I mean, the mindset at the time, because when was it that you launched it? Was it 2015?
So it's been going for 4 years, over 4 years, yeah.
Okay.
2015, 2016, 15-ish.
So, I mean, I get the rationale, right? Like, of wanting to do it because of not seeing anything else like it and the gap in the market. But the actual act of like setting up a website, writing a blog, like for some people, that's like their full-time job, right? Did you just dive into doing that, or was it quite a considered thing of like weighing up the options and whether or not you could even do it?
It's definitely evolved. I guess going back to one of the points of being constantly curious, I think I'm always kind of curious about how something's set up, how something's built, and I do try and do the research before I kind of dive into it. So I just kind of I just started out with like a really plain template that I use on WordPress. I remember showing you and Elroy it like at the start, like I think it was like day one when I submitted it. I was like, guys, what do you think? Like, do you think anything needs updating and that kind of stuff? And you were both like really supportive. You were like, it looks great, like just go for it and just see what happens. And then it's just kind of evolved over time, really. So as the kind of the traffic and kind of increased, and as more and more people started to kind of post and share, I kind of had the opportunity, I guess, to invest a bit more into it. So it's just kind of, I've just learned as I've gone along. And there's still things that I learn all the time, and it's great as well, actually, because I work predominantly in paid search, but actually doing the blog myself has meant that I can learn so much about like SEO, and the kind of the skills I learned from it are really invaluable as well, to kind of improve my knowledge and understanding of how some of the clients might think as well, just starting a website or a business from scratch. So it's been really valuable, actually, and something I've really enjoyed.
And it's that typical thing of like nothing happens overnight, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, you put
it does
like,
take a while. It takes I mean, it's like 4 years now I've been doing it, and in the first like year, the traffic, it was like a couple of hundred people or something, every couple of months, and I'm like, oh great. But now it's like every couple of days is like that kind of level of traffic, kind of exceeding it. So it takes a while. You need, that's why search engine optimization isn't something that happens overnight. You need to kind of work hard and get the right content in there and make sure it's relevant and up to date and kind of following best practice. And
but also you're building a brand, right? Like you're building a brand.
Yeah.
People have to get to know you. And I think this is maybe one of the final things, we can touch on, which is the idea of you have paid advertising and obviously this whole world, which is great. But then you also have branding, which is obviously not necessarily pure play paid ads only. And a lot of people look at one or the other as sort of two separate things, as opposed to maybe the combined strategy of both. Ultimately, I think what everybody wants is brand. Like you want to be Nike or Adidas or McDonald's because people automatically know that brand. And they still do paid advertising, right? Yeah. But if you're starting out and no one knows your brand, either you just invest the time or you can use paid ads to maybe help get in front of an audience in a way that you maybe couldn't have done 20 years ago to get more eyes on what your brand is, and then put enough good content out that people actually see that it's valuable content.
Definitely,
as opposed to just shit spewing content for the sake of it.
Yeah, exactly. If it's relevant, then the performance and stuff runs itself. So more people will share it, more people will like it, they'll tell their friends about it, and I think if you can cut through the noise, then I guess my blog's a metaphor for that, right? So it's you cut through the noise, you target the people you want to talk to, you make it useful for them and relevant, and then it kind of goes from there. And it's the same principle for any small business trying to compete against the Nikes or Adidas.
Yep. So okay, final little thing then. In terms of, I guess, digital advertising and ads and stuff, the regular person on the street, I think, knows what they are now, and they know that they're getting, ads on Google, on Facebook, and being shown remarketing banners. Where do you see things maybe going, in the next 5 or 10 years with ads per se? A lot of people have this fear of like, we're going to turn into a Minority Report style thing where we'll have screens everywhere that are just like full swipe only. And, I saw articles about how in San Francisco, some of the tech companies had already tested, like in the car, on the windows at the back of the passenger side of the car, like actually putting ads like in the car windows and stuff. Yeah. But like realistically, what does your gut tell you in terms of where you think it could go as a best guess?
I think GDPR, I think, was a really big movement that made people a lot more aware of the data that they were giving out. And yes, every website you go on now just asks for your consent on like accepting all these policies and cookies and that kind of thing. But I think that's really it's a great conversation to start having, and I think will continue to hopefully happen over the coming years. Is that people will be taking a lot more control over their data, and a lot of these kind of companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, whoever your kind of whatever platforms you're using to target your customers, they're going to have to be a lot more transparent over how you're targeted and whether you actually you want to opt in or out of those kind of targeting and that kind of stuff. And I think that's really it's great for consumers. It's actually great for advertisers as well, because it means that you can cut through the waffle, and instead of just targeting everyone, then you target only the people you want to speak to and only the people that want to be spoken to. So if anything, your performance will increase, the wastage will also kind of reduce. So I think to be honest, like a lot of the conversations we'll have over the next couple of years will hopefully continue in that vein of having the user at front of mind instead of just pushing the message that the brands want to push. It's more about using the customer's data that they give you consent to use to target them in the appropriate way, and giving them the transparency to make the decisions that they want to make as well. So have control over the data.
And then, so say me as regular user makes those changes and says to whatever platform, this is what I consent to, this is what I don't consent to. What could I then potentially expect in terms of the types of ads that I might see, whether it's search or Facebook video or YouTube? Would I expect it to be super generalized, or should I start to maybe brace myself for even more tailored ads to just who I am as a person and how I'm wired on sort of a more, subconscious level?
Yeah, I think right now, I think it needs to be a balance, right? It needs to be kind of relevant to your context and the kind of situation that you're in. I think there's always been like fear of like I think Spotify does this, right? So Spotify says like, "Hey Dan, why don't you listen to this if this playlist or this podcast or
And you're
anything like
like,
that?"
hey, Spotify,
You're
why
like,
don't
"Ooh."
you fuck off?
Exactly. Like, how does it know my name?
Yeah.
You get really freaked out by it. But obviously, I've given that data. I've given, and they can essentially, I've given the consent for them to do that. So, so I think there needs to be a balance. So you can't just say, I know that what works really well actually at the moment is like the retargeting, but it becomes really annoying after a while, and also people get freaked out sometimes by it. If they don't have that awareness that they're giving the consent, if you go into a website and they get retargeted by a certain product or something that they've recently visited, I think having this conversation is healthy to that extent, because it means that I'm now aware that if I go to another website and this brand is following me around the internet, that I've given the consent for that to happen. And actually, if I don't want that to happen, I need to make sure that I'm more conscious of what I'm opting into next time. So I think, sorry, what was your question again? I've forgotten it. I've just waffled on there.
It was more about like if I'm
Where do I
the
think it's going?
if I'm the end user, what could I expect
Yeah.
to maybe start seeing in terms of ads? Will it change? Will it be what it is already, or is it going to be more tailored to me in terms of?
Yeah, I think like I said, yeah, I think it's more tailored to your context and intent, and that's essentially what I think will happen more in the future, rather than just the fact that yeah, that is the kind of like it's not just a creepy Spotify ad, for example. It's going to be relevant to the situation, and actually that I'll probably respond well to that in the future, hopefully, if it's done right. It can go either way really, I guess, at the moment. But
Awesome. All right, dude. Well, look, I mean, let's kind of wrap it up, I guess. Any kind of closing key things that you'd want people to take away about either the industry or how it works, or if you're going to get into it, like what would be some big takeaways to leave people with? And then I guess let people know where they can connect with you and find the blog as well and plug all that good stuff.
So definitely, if you're thinking about going into the industry, give it a try. The skills you learn are transferable, so even if it doesn't work out for you, like you can take those skills elsewhere and do something else with them. So it's all good. I think it's a great time to join, actually, because there's so much change that's happening. You'll kind of, if you kind of throw everything into it, you'll be able to get to the forefront of everything that's happening at the moment. There's so much data, so much kind of interesting conversations around what we can do with that data. That is a really, really exciting time. So I think, yeah, for me, it's if you're going to do it, like, go hard or go home. And make sure you kind of talk about the stuff think about the stuff that we've already talked about. So make sure that you don't listen to the hippo, that you kind of you build teams around the ideas of focusing on them as humans, and trying to build that great culture, because everything else will come from there. In terms of, like, I guess, where you can find me on LinkedIn, all the usual stuff, and then it's on ppchubbub.com as well.
Love it. Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you, dude. It's been I think a good chat, and lots of stuff for people that know about the industry that they can maybe sort of listen to, but also for people that just have no idea what it is, that I want to get a bit of a feel for it. So I appreciate it, man. It's been good.
No problem. Thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity, and really looking forward to seeing how everything goes in the future with this podcast and stuff. It's
me
great.
too.
I've been really enjoying it.
Me too. Well, I don't know about enjoying it, but I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Slow burn, like with your blog. Slow burn.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be good. It'll be great. We'll see you on the Tonight Show or something in the next couple of years, I'm sure.
Maybe as a guest at best. I don't want to be hosting it, to be fair. I love Jimmy Fallon. He can keep the job. in case he's ever watching.